Cutter's Corner.
Hi guys, Old Niles Thrompton here with yet another episode of Cutter's Corner. As you'll recall, a couple of weeks ago on the inaugural episode of Old Niles Thrompton's Guitar Odyssey, I reviewed a very reasonably priced guitar from Monoprice, the Indio Retro Classic something rather. I can't even remember what it was called. You know, since first taking that guitar out of its gig bag, to plugging it into an amp, to braising it and cooking it up with some Leeks vinaigrette, and I mean, since enjoying its value-priced yet quality tones, I have enjoyed it ever since. Now, since that inaugural episode, I took the liberty of modifying that guitar a little bit, tweaking it here and there, and bringing it up to what I thought it could be given the quality and price. Now, I know what you're saying at this point. Old Niles Thrompton, show us this modified guitar right now before we come kidnap you, throw you in a time machine, and send you back to the prehistoric age where you'll no doubt be eaten instantly by some giant, terrifying beast. My thoughts exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here it is!
So as you can see, the bulk of the install for this was putting in the humbucker and humbucker bridge. Of course, I dropped in some stainless steel saddles, an Esquire pickguard, my own homemade control plate, and of course, moving up the neck. One of the most important things, well, from my perspective, is shaping the headstock a little bit to get rid of that hook and make it look a little more like a traditional tele.
So anyways, in this episode, what I want to do is show you a little bit of how I got to the end stage of the modifications on this Indio guitar by doing a similar modification job to another guitar. Just like in the previous episode, I'll show you the how-to, break down a list of parts and associated costs, and finally show you how to cook just like in the last episode, I'll show you the how-to and give you a list of parts and associated costs. All in the hopes that if you choose to do a similar modification, it'll be made all that much easier. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you at the table.
Okay, folks, so not to pull the wool over your eyes here or pull a fast one on you, but scope of this project has changed a little bit. We were going to do a simple humbucker bridge install. Instead, I had a bunch of parts lying around that I just had to use, so we're going to do more of a deluxe tele project. And thus, we'll start with this deluxe style pickguard, which I cut from a blank. Still needs a little bit of smoothing out on the edges. We'll get to that later. And we got this Telecaster humbucker bridge, which is through body and top loading, so very useful for our purposes here. We got this knockoff wide range humbucker here. It is an inexpensive knockoff. We'll get to that later. Standard 3-way switch, WD 500K pots for good switching and tone. And finally, this really cheap, lightweight paw-LOH-nee body. Got this a while ago, used way too much paint on it, got frustrated, tossed it aside, thought I'd never use it, but, you know, for our purposes, we'll use it for this project. And finally, we've got this Squier Affinity Stratocaster large style headstock neck. So just before we begin, what do you do when you've got a pre-drilled neck, but a very inexpensive body, or any body for that matter, where the neck pocket is blank and not drilled? Well, there are a couple ways to tackle this issue, and one of the easiest ways is to take some red paint or other brightly colored paint and slather that liberally, carefully, mind you, over the back of the neck heel. Place that back in the neck pocket, and after you squeeze that against the neck pocket, apply a bit of pressure, and very carefully pull that out again without moving it up and down too much, and that should give you a very good impression of the heel in the back of the neck pocket, including all 4 holes, which should tell you where to drill. Now, one upshot of this inexpensive paw-LOH-nee body I noticed early on was that Squier Affinity necks made in China, or Indonesia for that matter, most likely, fit just perfectly snugly into this neck pocket, almost like they were made for one another. Are we living in a simulation? Did Oswald act alone? Who knows? All I know is there's an eerie coincidence about this. So let's talk about measuring for the bridge. One simple way is to take a very fine chalk line, drape that through the nut slot on the high E, extend that down the neck, and chalk out your ideal string reveal. That's the ideal space you want your high E from the side of the neck. Then while using this clothing measuring tape, I use this as opposed to a standard measuring tape because it's more stretchy and pliable, set the side of the tape exactly along that string reveal chalk line you've created and measure 25.5 inches from the exact bottom of the nut right to the middle of the high E saddle. Once you've measured your ideal string reveal in combination with the correct distance of the high E saddle from the nut, I'm just going to take this magic marker here and very gently circularly mark out the holes. Now one thing you can do as you begin drilling here is drill your center hole first, put a screw through that, just string up your high E and low E, and then check if your string reveal is still in the right place. Therefore, if it's not, you can move that bridge a little bit to the left or right as necessary before you drill the other two holes. But in this case, the string reveal and bridge spacing are fine, so I take a paint stick and I'm going to mark out where I'm going to cut for the humbucker. Oh, and be sure to put your stick in those humbucker holes as well. That didn't sound right. Then drill 2 holes, screw your humbucker in place, and measure around the wings. If you're just putting on a large deluxe style pickguard, being precise is not such a big deal. But if you're putting on a classic tele pickguard like I did with the Indio, you want to be fairly precise in your measuring and cutting. Alright, so here's the measured hole, and we're ready to get started on our routes. Now for this, as per usual, I use a destroyer bit on a Dremel. It's like an engraving bit, I think it's called. I just call it a destroyer bit because it destroys things. And I very carefully cut around the sides of my measurements until I've got a satisfactory sized cut. Now you can kind of go back and forth. What I generally do is cut this, vacuum, drop my bridge into place to see if everything fits, and then repeat until I've got a fairly decent sized cut. In this case, I had a few skips, but this wood is very soft, and made my hole a little bit too big, but I'm not too worried about that. It's mostly going to be covered by the pickguard. Now with the spade bit, I'm going to drill a large hole for the 3-way switch to sit in, and I'm also going to have to create a canal going to the neck pickup slot for my wiring. So after that's all done, fit everything back into place, and it fits all fine and dandy, and I'm a happy camper. Now at this point, since I've drilled and set my bridge and fastened my pickguard in place where it's going to sit, what I've done is I've just loosely fastened this bridge in place with the 3 bottom screws, and I've raised the bridge up over the bottom of the pickguard so that I can trace around it with my paint stick as closely as possible. Then I take this sturdy pair of Sears Craftsman shears, great all-purpose shears by the way, and I'll cut around the inside of my markings. These shears will provide a fairly accurate first cut, and then after that I'll just be able to take a little file or sandpaper to be able to smooth the rest out. And here's my basic cut, and it fits into place fairly snugly. Now one thing I wanted to do for a while is create a deluxe Telecaster pickguard with a Squire or Fender 51 slanted neck cut. I've got a Squire 51 pickguard on hand, so I just snug that pickguard up against the bottom of the heel as closely as possible, and as usual I just trace the hole with a paint stick. Then to accurately cut a hole for the neck pickup, I use a grinding bit on my Dremel. This is slower and thus less prone to skips and errors. Alright, so this strategy has paid off as that neck pickup fits nice and snug in the hole. Now after comically over-shielding this guitar, I've gone ahead and created my own output jack, mainly because I'm a cheapskate and I don't want to go out and buy a new one when I can create one out of sheet metal fairly easily. Then I went ahead and wired up the switch. Now I'm not going to go through the whole wiring process on this because it'd be fairly tedious and hard to get in there with the camera. But suffice to say, I'm simply going to run these wires through the cavities to where the control plate would normally be, connect the pickups, connect everything to the pots, and then connect everything to the output jack. I'll be back in a minute. And after an extensive wiring job, which took a bit too long due to unforeseen circumstances, and stringing it up, here's the final product. Now I see a few edges which could still be smoothed out, and still needs a bit of a cleanup, but overall, everything fits fine, and just as importantly, everything works. Anyways, enough of this building and fussing and feuding. Let's hear some sounds. Hi everybody, back with the wrap-up and my final thoughts on this interesting build. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy overall with this build, though it was not without its challenges, as is to be expected in a project where you do a lot of stuff from scratch. In this case, shaping the pickguard, doing all the routing, the wiring, the painting ahead of time, takes a lot of time. But if you're willing to expend the effort, do your measurements, be patient, and take your time, you can come out with a modest outcome like this, and without breaking the bank in the process. Secondly, as I mentioned before, this particular wood is a little bit of a pain in the ass. It's cheap, it's easy to work with and cut through, it's super lightweight, but it's also easily chippable, and in the case of this guitar, required a lot of paint. So would I recommend this for a guitar project? Well, if you're just looking for a really cheap body you can use in a prototype project, or a body where you're willing to slather a half dozen coats of paint or more over, then hey, this wood might be a good choice. Now I'll put the link to where I purchased this body in the comments section. And finally, pickups do make a major difference, especially on an inexpensive build like this. You know, it's a shame that the company that I ordered this pickup from didn't send me the neck and bridge combo that I ordered, and instead just sent me the neck pickup, which is what's in the bridge here. Now, this particular pickup sounds adequate in the bridge, but that'll definitely need to be swapped out at a later date. It's a bit muddy and unclear, and yeah, you can tell the level of quality in that. And of course, this neck pickup I've had lying around for a long time does the job in that position as well. Now, in terms of the original premise of this project, before he got carried away with the full-scale 72 style build, the bridge on this guitar came from Amazon, and you can find it here. I'll of course include the link as well in the comments section. As mentioned before, this has holes for top loading and string through, so it makes it easier to measure for a bridge, especially if you haven't got the holes drilled through your body already. Now, as mentioned before, if you do have or are purchasing a monoprice Indio Telecaster like I featured before, it's already drilled for string through, so you can pretty much just start by fastening this bridge into the middle screw hole, drill the other two holes, and you're set. So overall, guys, I'm pretty satisfied with this modest build here. You know, there's nothing better than taking an old pile of parts you've had around for a long time and throwing them together to create something like this, especially a concept that you've wanted to bring to life for a while. And as for you guys, if any of you can make a better version of this, preferably something that looks almost exactly like this, I would love to see it. Anyways, guys, that'll do it for this episode of Old Niles Thrompton's Cutter's Corner. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, keep on playing, and keep watching the channel for a whole lot more. And just before we go, I'd like to take this opportunity to give a smooth shout out to my friend Garbage Face, who just released a new album, Dimaxion. Great compilation by a great artist who blends some of the best doom rap and industrial to create soundscapes like you wouldn't believe. This new album is awesome and built on a body of work he's accumulated over the years, which you can find over on his Bandcamp page. You can also find his albums and merchandise there, so I'll put the link in the description. Once again, thank you all for taking the time to watch this video. We'll see you next time.